The shot rolled for miles, and still no one came. No questions. No answers. Only that heavy quiet that sticks to your ribs and never lets go. That's what haunts Luke Saunders most. Not the blood, not the dust, not even the scream, but the hush that followed. The way folks at the funeral wouldn't meet his eyes, like they couldn't tell if he was the unlucky one or something worse. 5 years back, his wife Emily died right in front of him. One minute they were laughing on the porch, the next she was bleeding in his arms from a bullet that wasn't meant for her. Wrong place, wrong time. The sheriff called it accident. The town called it fate. Luke called it the day the world quit. He didn't rage or beg. He packed his things and drove west until the map ran out of names. Now he lives 20 dusty miles past Silver City, New Mexico. Off the grid, off the record, off limits to just about everyone. He sleeps with a rifle next to the bed, talks more to a horse named Duke than to people. And the only thing colder than the tin roof is the empty space where Emily used to be. Luke isn't living. He's keeping the engine running. Some days, even that feels optional. But out here, where the earth bakes and the wind remembers, change is coming. The air shifted. A storm gathered. The past never stays buried long. June in New Mexico plays rough. It burns your skin, hardens the dirt, and turns the air thick enough to chew. Luke knew the drill. Another long day riding the south fence, checking where last week's surprise monsoon chewed up the line. Same heat, same dust, same nothing, until he saw it. A dark shape just beyond the arroyo. Could have been roadkill. Could have been trouble. Duke snorted, ears pinned, not liking the scent. Luke narrowed his eyes, slid off the saddle, hand easing toward the rifle. It wasn't dead. Not yet. It was a girl, young Apache. Blood and dirt streaked her face. Her left arm bent the wrong way. Lips cracked from sun. Eyes half closed but alert, dangerous in the way of cornered things. She didn't cry or beg. She pulled a small, rusted knife from her belt and held it up like it meant everything. Luke didn't flinch. He raised his empty hands. "Easy," he said, voice low. "I'm not here to hurt you." She might not have caught the words, but she understood the tone, the tired in his eyes, the rough peace in how he stood. He pointed to her arm, then toward his cabin, shelter, water, medicine. Her gaze held, feral and measuring. Then the blade fell from her fingers. Luke let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That small clatter might have saved her life. He lifted her gently. She was too light, burning with fever, trembling like a bird in a dust storm. Back at the cabin, he laid her on the cot, built a fire, and boiled water. The place smelled like smoke, whiskey, and, finally, life. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. He reset her arm, cleaned the deep gash in her leg, kept the kettle on. Did the work a man does when there's no one else around. Days passed. Silence turned into signals. She watched him close, cautious, not hateful. She ate what he cooked, drank what he offered. On the third morning she whispered, "Mariah." 24. That's all she gave. It didn't take long for Luke to see she wasn't only hurt. She was hunted. He saw it in the way she tensed when wind changed, in how she froze when Duke neighed too loud. Something ugly was coming, and sooner than he'd hoped. One afternoon, while Luke was checking the chicken coop for riders kicked up dust on the far flats, white men from Silver City, the kind who drink more than they think and treat brown skin like a problem. He didn't wait. He hurried inside and told Mariah to hide. She didn't argue. Luke stepped to the porch, rifle easy in his hands, voice like stone. "What brings you out here?" Brody. Same smirk Luke knew from bar fights, rolled his shoulders. "Heard you picked up some wild thing. Thought we'd return her." Luke didn't blink. "She's under my roof. She stays." Brody's grin died. He spat. "You making this your fight, Saunders?" Luke raised the rifle slow, steady. "I already did." A long quiet stretched. Brody turned his horse. "We'll be back. Next time we don't knock." They rode off, but Luke knew that wasn't an end. It was the starting gun. If that moment tightened your chest or lit a spark, you're in the right place. Out here, stories don't end with one standoff. They start there. If you're still with me, hit subscribe. There's more. The morning after Brody's threat, Luke woke different, not scared, not even mad, just done waiting. He'd lived quiet for years, never asked for trouble, but trouble had drawn a line. Mariah stood on the far side of it. She moved easier now, helped around the place, even laughed once when Duke sneezed into his oats. Still, a shadow lived behind her smile, something older than fear, worn into the small scar on her cheek and the hush in her voice. Luke didn't pry. That morning she told him anyway. She'd been blamed for what she didn't cause, an outbreak, a sickness. Her people called her cursed and pushed her out with a sack and shame. Luke listened, not with pity, but with knowing. He understood the weight of other people's silence. That's when it clicked. This wasn't just about hiding Mariah. It was about standing up for something larger. Worth, dignity, the idea that a man's home is his, and who he shelters is his choice. That afternoon, dust rose again, 6 riders this time. Brody brought friends. Luke loaded the rifle, checked his sidearm, told Mariah to stay low, but leave the back door open. The men halted at the gate. Brody didn't bother smiling. Last chance, Saunders. Luke stepped forward. This is my land. Deciding who belongs here is my say. Then the world snapped. A gun barked. A horse reared. Bullets tore the dry air. Luke dug behind the trough, fired twice. One rider tumbled, screaming. The others ducked. From inside, Mariah pulled down the old Winchester above the fireplace. Her shots were clean, sharp, like she'd done it before. When the dust settled, only 2 men rode off, one limping, one bleeding. Brody didn't ride at all. The sun sagged orange and slow, like an old dog finding shade. Luke buried the dead and washed the blood from the porch. The quiet stayed. He sat on the steps, boots caked with dust, hands black with powder. Mariah stood beside him, steady, saying nothing, needing none. Out in the wide land, something had shifted. The ranch wasn't his alone anymore. It was theirs. That mattered. Mariah didn't leave. She didn't have to ask. She planted a garden behind the coop, stacked a ring of stones under the oak for evenings, and told stories with her hands more than her mouth. Luke taught her to trim hooves. She showed him where wild herbs hide in the cuts of the hills for aching joints. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. Healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's 2 people showing up every day. A man who'd lost everything. A woman cast out for scars that weren't her doing. Somehow they build a home where neither had won. That's the West. It doesn't hand you peace. You build it, post by post, nail by nail, breath by breath. What counts isn't how many storms you've endured, but the shelter you put up when the clouds finally break. So let me ask you, what would you do if those horses stopped at your gate? If it was your porch, your dirt, your heart on the line, would you draw the line like Luke? Would you stand by a stranger like Mariah? Or would fear talk you into stepping aside? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And if this story stirred anything true in you, loss, love, or just the simple belief that everyone deserves a place to belong, don't go yet. Hit subscribe and give this a like. We're not finished. There's more out in the dust, more reckonings, more quiet wins. Ride with us through every turn. This trail's just opening, and you'll want to be here when the next rise shows itself. The echo of that old gunshot still hangs over Luke's days, but now the silence that once smothered him has a different shape. He and Mariah learned a rhythm. The chores, the small jokes, the way Duke pushes his nose into a pocket for a carrot he sure is there. Mornings, she waters seedlings with the careful hands of someone rebuilding from her roots. Evenings, he oils the rifle, not because he expects trouble every hour, but because care is its own kind of peace. Sometimes the wind sifts through the arroyo and pulls at the memory of that funeral. Faces turned away, questions left rotting. Luke lets the wind take what it wants and keeps what he needs. The sound of a kettle, the scrape of a chair, the soft thud of Duke's hooves in the yard. Mariah speaks a little more. She laughs in full when the rooster startles himself. But some nights she still wakes before dawn and sits under the oak, eyes on a horizon only she can see. Luke doesn't ask what it shows her. He brings coffee and sits, letting the steam and the quiet do the talking. On a hot Tuesday, a lone rider crested the ridge, young, leather gloves, thinking he was 10 feet tall. He pulled up stiff and called out, "I'm here for the girl." Luke didn't rise. "No, you're not." The rider dismounted, hands sliding toward his belt. Luke closed the space, caught his wrist, turned, and dropped him face first into the grit. "Next time I won't be nice." The kid left, pride limping harder than his legs. That night, Mariah stepped close and wrapped him up, not from fear or thanks, but something steadier. "I'm not afraid anymore," she said. Funny thing, neither was he. Weeks stretched into a season. The garden took, green pushing through baked earth. The oak stone circle filled with evenings, shared bread, a whittled story, a look that said more than a page. They never called it love. They didn't have to. Sometimes the way she refilled his cup before he lifted it, or the way he fixed her tack without being asked, said it plain. Not every story starts with roses and fireworks. Some grow out of dirt and silence and pain, and still grow. Those are the ones that hold. Word trickled back to town, as it always does. Some folks muttered. Some chose not to. Sheriff kept his distance. There's a way a place looks at a man after he draws a line and doesn't step back, half wary, half respectful. Luke didn't pay it much mind. He had fences to mend and a roof that groaned before monsoon. Mariah had seedlings to shade and herbs to dry. Peace is work. Work is peace. One evening, as the sun slid copper over the ridge, Mariah set 2 stones on the edge of the ring. "For what's gone," she said, "and for what stays." Luke nodded. He didn't have better words. He didn't need them. The wind carried the smell of creosote and the far-off whistle of a train that hadn't run this way in years. The kind of sound that makes you think about roads you didn't take and roads you built yourself because no one else would. If you've been listening, you already know. Out here, there's no hero waiting over the next hill. There's just you, your choices, and the people you choose to stand beside. Luke chose. Mariah chose. And the world, hard as it is, bent a little to make room. Now it's your turn. If a stranger showed up at your fence, bruised and burning with fever, would you fetch water? If riders came grinning with rules that never were laws, would you open your door wider or lock it tighter? Say it out loud. Say it in the comments. Someone needs to hear you mean it. And if this trail felt true, tap like so others can find it. Subscribe to ride along. The wind's shifting again. New dust on the horizon. More voices, more lines to draw, more quiet victories you won't find on a front page. We'll be here, post by post, nail by nail, breath by breath, building the kind of shelter that keeps a life standing when the clouds finally clear.